The salvage yards of Frontier Station 7 stretched across 3 kilometers of rusted metal and broken dreams. Captain Marcus Webb navigated through towers of discarded hull plating, his boots crunching on debris that had once been somebody's livelihood. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just parts for his aging cargo hauler. What he found instead was a girl. She crouched between 2 collapsed shipping containers, her blue-gray skin nearly invisible against the shadows. 4 thin arms wrapped around her knees, and her large amber eyes tracked his movement with the wariness of something hunted. She couldn't have been more than 15 cycles old by human standards, though Marcus knew that meant nothing when dealing with alien biology. "Easy there," Marcus said, stopping 10 feet away. He raised his hand slowly. "Not going to hurt you." The girl didn't respond. Her breathing quickened. Marcus noticed the torn fabric of what might have been a station uniform. No shoes. No identification badge. Her lower arms bore marks that looked suspiciously like restraint burns. "You speak Standard?" Marcus asked. The girl's head tilted slightly. One of her upper hands moved to touch her throat, then made a gesture Marcus recognized from his time in the outer colonies. "Sign language." She was mute. Marcus nodded slowly. "Right. That makes this harder." He looked around the salvage yard, then back at the girl. "You got anywhere to go?" She signed again. Marcus caught the negative gesture, even if he couldn't understand the rest. "Course not," he muttered. "Nobody ends up in the yards because life's going great." He should have walked away. Station 7 wasn't his problem. Neither was whatever situation had landed this kid in the scrap heaps. Marcus had cargo routes to run, debts to pay, and a ship that needed more repairs than he could afford. Taking on a stray alien girl was the kind of stupid decision that got people killed in the frontier regions, but those burns on her arms bothered him. So did the fear in her eyes. "Tell you what," Marcus said. "I'm camped out in Bay 12, working on my ship. You want to come sit somewhere warm for a bit, maybe get some food? You're welcome to. No obligations. You can leave whenever." The girl studied him for a long moment. Then, very slowly, she unwrapped her arms from her knees and stood. She barely came up to his shoulder. Marcus led her back through the yards to where his ship, the Wayward Sun, sat connected to a power umbilical. The vessel had seen better decades. Hull patches covered hull patches, and the main thruster assembly looked like it had been welded together by a blind engineer with shaking hands. But it was home. Inside, Marcus gestured to the galley bench. "Sit. I'll find something edible." The girl perched on the edge of the bench, all 4 hands folded in her lap. She looked around the ship's interior with something approaching wonder, as if the cramped, oil-stained space was a palace. Marcus heated up a protein pack and slid it across the table. The girl picked it up with her upper right hand, sniffed it, and began eating with a desperate hunger that made his chest tight. "Slow down," he said. "You'll make yourself sick." She didn't slow down. Over the next 3 days, the girl stayed in Bay 12. Marcus learned her name through patient work with a datapad translator. Lyra. He learned she was Tethian, from a colony world that had gone dark 2 years ago. He learned she'd been trafficked through 4 different stations before escaping on 7. What he didn't learn was where she could go. The station authorities were corrupt. The refugee services were overwhelmed, and most ships wouldn't take on unregistered passengers, especially not alien ones with no credit and no connections. Marcus told himself he'd figure something out. Find someone trustworthy to take her in. Maybe one of the charity organizations in the core systems. But when he ran the numbers, when he looked at the reality of how the frontier worked, he knew the truth. Lyra had nowhere to go. "Right," Marcus said on the 4th morning, standing in the cargo bay with his hands on his hips. "If you're staying, you need a space of your own." Lyra's eyes widened. She signed something rapid and questioning. Yeah, staying, Marcus confirmed. Ship's got room, barely, but we can make it work. The cargo bay was mostly empty, a 15-meter square of bare deck plating and exposed conduits. One corner held his parts inventory. The rest was unused space he couldn't afford to fill with actual cargo. Marcus started dragging materials in from the salvage yards. Hull plates, support beams, insulation foam, a pressure door from a demolished mining shuttle. Everything was scarred and battered, but it was solid enough. Lyra watched for the first hour. Then she started helping. Her 4 arms gave her an advantage Marcus hadn't anticipated. She could hold 2 support beams steady while positioning a third and welding with the 4th. She learned to read his measurement marks and cut materials to specification. She had an instinct for structural integrity that surprised him. You've done construction before, Marcus observed. Lyra nodded. She signed something elaborate. Marcus checked his datapad. Your father was a builder. Right, that tracks. They worked for 6 days straight, only stopping to sleep and eat. Marcus taught Lyra how to use the plasma cutter safely. She showed him a Tethian riveting technique that was twice as fast as the standard method. They assembled walls from deck plates, reinforced them with scavenged I-beams, and sealed the joints with industrial adhesive. The structure took shape in the corner of the cargo bay. 3 meters by 4 meters. High enough for Lyra to stand comfortably. Marcus installed the pressure door on heavy-duty hinges, then added a proper seal and a manual lock. For privacy, he explained. Inside, they built furniture from storage crates. A bed platform, a desk, shelves that Lyra could reach with any of her 4 arms. Marcus wired in power from the ship's grid, installed LED strips for lighting, and connected a small air circulation unit. Lyra stood in the doorway of her new room, all 4 hands pressed to her face. Her shoulders shook. Marcus shifted awkwardly. It's not much. Walls are just scrap metal. Doors secondhand. But it's solid, and it's yours. She turned to face him, tears streaming down her blue-gray cheeks. She signed something that took Marcus a moment to translate. No one has ever built anything for me before. Marcus cleared his throat. Yeah, well, everyone needs a place. Over the following weeks, Lyra made the space her own. She painted the walls with colors she mixed from maintenance supplies. She hung fabric she'd bartered for at the station market, creating curtains and wall decorations. She arranged her few possessions on the shelves with obvious care. Marcus found himself making other adjustments. He installed a second water recycler so Lyra could shower without cutting into his supply. He modified a spare pressure suit to fit her 4-armed anatomy. He taught her to pilot the wayward son, starting with basic controls and working up to navigation. You're part of the crew now, he said. Crew needs to know how things work. Lyra proved to be a quick study. Her 4 arms meant she could monitor multiple systems simultaneously. Her Tethian eyesight picked up warning indicators Marcus sometimes missed. Within a month, she was handling landing sequences better than he did. She also turned out to be brilliant with repairs. Marcus would spend hours wrestling with a faulty power coupling, making no progress. Lyra would study the problem for 10 minutes, then fix it with a solution so elegant, Marcus felt stupid for not seeing it himself. Your father taught you well, Marcus said after she jury-rigged a failing environmental processor with parts from a broken coffee maker. Lyra smiled. She signed. He said everyone should know how to build and fix things. The universe breaks everything eventually. Smart man, Marcus said quietly. 6 months after finding Lyra in the salvage yards, Marcus stood in the cargo bay, watching her work on a new project. She'd asked permission to expand her room, add a small workshop attachment. He'd agreed immediately. Now she was cutting deck plates with the precision of an experienced engineer. her 4 arms moving in coordinated rhythm. She'd grown stronger, healthier. The fear in her eyes had been replaced with confidence. She wore coveralls Marcus had bought her, modified to accommodate her anatomy, with her name stitched over the pocket in Tethian script. The wayward son had changed too. It ran better than it had in years, thanks to Lyra's maintenance work. The cargo bay was organized efficiently. They'd even landed a few decent contracts, enough to stay ahead of expenses. Marcus knew what people would think. Human captain picking up an alien kid, giving her a home, teaching her to crew. Some would call it exploitation. Others would question his motives. He didn't care. The truth was simpler than any conspiracy or judgment. Lyra had needed a place to exist, and he'd had the space and materials to build one. Everything else had followed naturally. She worked because she wanted to contribute, not because he demanded it. She stayed because she chose to, not because she was trapped. And somewhere along the way, the wayward son had stopped being a lonely ship limping through the frontier. It had become something else. Home. Lyra finished her cutting and looked up, catching Marcus watching. She signed a question. "Just thinking," Marcus said. "You've done good work here." "Real good." She signed back. "You gave me the tools and the space." "You did the building," Marcus countered. Lyra considered this. Then she signed something that made Marcus's throat tight. "We both did. That is what family means." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah, I suppose it does." Outside the ship, Frontier Station 7 continued its chaotic existence. The salvage yards grew higher with each passing day. Ships came and went, carrying cargo and dreams and people running from something or toward something else. The frontier ground on, indifferent and unforgiving. But inside Bay 12, in a cargo hauler held together by stubborn determination and creative welding, 2 beings who had nothing had built something that mattered. A room constructed from scrap metal and hope, homegrown from kindness and shared work. A family formed not by blood or species, but by the simple act of seeing someone who needed help and choosing to provide it. Marcus Webb returned to his maintenance checklist. Lyra went back to her workshop expansion. The wayward son's engines hummed their steady rhythm, and in the corner of the cargo bay, a small room with painted walls and fabric curtains stood as proof that sometimes the most important construction projects required nothing more than salvaged materials and the willingness to build something for someone else.